It was seen as an historic agreement. Last year, Germany apologized for atrocities committed in Namibia in the colonial era. Between 1904 and 1908, German soldiers killed tens of thousands of Ovaherero and Nama people in what became known as the first genocide of the 20th century. As part of last year's deal, Berlin also agreed to fund projects for the groups worth more than 1 billion euros. But descendants of the victims are unhappy with the agreement. They say it's not enough and were excluded from the negotiations. And now they're urging Germany to change it. Well, let's discuss this further with Sima Leipert. She is a Namibian activist and serves on the Nama Traditional Leaders Technical Committee on Genocide. She's currently in Berlin to speak with the German government about the reparation deal. It's good to have you with us here on DW News Africa. Could you first tell us why you're unhappy about this current agreement?
Yes, thank you for having me. We don't agree with the agreement because, first of all, it has been done without our participation. Also, it does not address the crime of genocide at all. It is basically a demand from a former colony, from its former colonial master for development funding in lieu of reparations, and it uses the genocide as a smokescreen to look for this funding. And this is why we don't agree with it, but also a key deficiency is that it does not address the needs of those in the diaspora who went into exile as a result of this genocide. So, yes, but fundamentally, it does not acknowledge genocide. It does not acknowledge genocide as a crime, but it is rather constitutes a legitimate claim from a former colonial master for the crime of colonization, but it does not address the crime of genocide.
So you're here now to try to persuade the German government to change the current deal. How far have you gotten with that?
We have requested a meeting, particularly with the Foreign Office, the Foreign Minister, Frau Baerbock, but she has declined our invitation. We have been trying to get in touch with Ms. Baerbock for quite some time, since December last year, after she was put into office. But until now, it has been very disappointing that she has not made any attempt in order to engage directly with us. So, yes, unfortunately, the German government continues to refuse to talk to the Nama and the Ovaherero people.
Now, the Namibian government has accepted this deal, $1.3 billion in development to support your community. But are you saying that the government doesn't represent your people in these talks?
Yes, the Namibian government does not represent us in these talks because the genocide was not committed against the Namibian government. It was committed against the Nama and the Ovaherero people. The Nama and the Ovaherero people have got their legitimate representatives in terms also of Namibian law. And so Germany has a responsibility to talk to the communities against which this genocide was committed. The genocide was not committed against the Namibian government. And therefore, the Namibian government has got no legal authority or even political authority to speak on our behalf. Yes, the Namibian government has an important role to play on behalf of its citizens by facilitating this discussion between the Nama and Ovaherero people and the German government.
But Namibia's president has said that he represents all Namibians when it comes to this issue. And some would argue that perhaps this is politicizing something that is a domestic problem.
Mr. Kengop, the president of Namibia, does not represent the Nama and the Ovaherero people in this particular discussion. Not in general, but in this particular discussion. We have never asked him to represent us. We have the legal successors of the leaders against whom this genocide was committed, and they are the ones. We have the right to self-representation and to decide who is going to speak on our behalf.
OK, and finally, if you could just paint a picture for us on... Clearly, this issue still resonates amongst people living in Namibia right now. What are those issues? Just remind us again, and how far are you prepared to take this?
After the people were put into concentration camps, the German government passed a number of ordinances, one of them being the expropriation of land and livestock, of our property. We were put into native reserves, and we continue to remain in those native reserves. The purpose of these native reserves was to keep us in poverty, and this is where we still remain, and Germany has got a responsibility to do something about this. How far are we willing to take this? We are willing to take both the Namibian government to court for violating our right of self-representation, also doing things without our free prior informed consent.
Okay.
So, yes.
Sima Leipert, thank you very much indeed for speaking to DW News Africa.
Thank you.